It's a well-known saying that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It provides us with the much needed energy and nutrition to start the day on the right foot. Of course you probably all knew that, but there's one thing about breakfast that you probably don't know, and that is, breakfast can prevent attacks from zombies. That's right, because according to the Escapists, The Walking Dead, not having breakfast actually causes walkers to become more dangerous, as does not completing menial chores. So next time you're reading or watching The Walking Dead and things start getting ugly, just remember that everything can be solved by staying calm and cleaning some dishes.
Hooray!
This example is actually a description of one of the game mechanics featured in the Escapists The Walking Dead. If Rick doesn't make it to breakfast or forgets to clean up some of the blood around the farmyard, then a meter representing the amount of walkers in the area increases. Why skipping a meal causes this to happen, I'm not exactly sure, but it's just one of the many game mechanics featured in this game that just doesn't fit with its subject matter. The truth is the Escapists and The Walking Dead just do not go well together. This is very much an Escapist game with a Walking Dead skin plastered on top, and as such it just feels all over the place. It's a schizophrenic mess of a game that doesn't offer much for fans of The Walking Dead or the Escapists. Based on the comic book version of The Walking Dead, players control main character Rick as he completes various missions around some of the franchise's most notable locations. First impressions of this game are actually surprisingly good. The retro style introduction cutscene does have a certain charm to it, and controlling Rick as he escapes the hospital gunning down walkers that get in his way is a pretty fun start to the game. Unfortunately things only go downhill from here, and they do so very quickly. Simply put, most of the game mechanics just serve to frustrate and prevent the player from making any decent amount of progress. As already mentioned, if Rick doesn't attend events that happen during the day, then the walker threat increases. But on the other hand, if the player does follow these events rigorously, it leaves them with little time to do anything else. It doesn't help that these tasks are extremely boring. Picking up pieces of metal, putting them into a machine, and then taking out the metal is as boring as it sounds. And having to do errands like this every day makes this game a struggle to play. The majority of these tasks also feel completely out of place in a Walking Dead game, and most are just plain nonsensical. For example, one of the daily tasks during the prison level involves Rick cooking meat. Now firstly, I have never once witnessed Rick cooking for the group in either the comic or the TV show. And secondly, why would Rick failing to cook cause more walkers to appear? It seems like this mechanic was carried over from the original Escapist game, with little thought involved about how it would make sense in the Walking Dead universe. Another mechanic that frustrates me is the fact that every time the player starts a new scenario, Rick begins with very low level stats, making him remarkably underpowered. If the player wishes to survive against the walkers, then they need to increase Rick's strength, speed and intelligence. Strength relates to Rick's health and how much damage he can do, speed relates to how fast he can move, and intelligence affects what items Rick is able to craft. If the player is to walk out in the open soon after starting a new scenario and confront a walker, then one solitary walker will be enough to kill them, as Rick's attacks will barely even register. I think this is a bit ridiculous. I know walkers are meant to be a threat, but they do feel stupidly overpowered. The player can recruit other survivors to help take them down, but they are all completely useless. When I was in the prison, I decided to take Michonne out with me to help me find some items. In both the comics and the TV show, Michonne is a badass who can slay walkers with ease. However, it seems the developers completely forgot about this, as she can't even handle a couple of walkers in the game. The same applies for the rest of the survivors. They are more of a hindrance than anything else. Even crafting better items doesn't really help Rick combat enemies until he improves his strength stat, and in order to do this, players need to hit the gym. By pressing the trigger buttons, Rick can train to improve his strength in order to better deal with those pesky zombies. Truth be told, it's about as exciting as it sounds, and I ended up spending a ridiculous amount of time simply doing menial tasks throughout the day and fitting in gym sessions around them. At times it really did feel like I was playing Bodybuilder Simulator 2016 rather than a Walking Dead game. As if having to spend an obscene amount of time working out and reading isn't enough, if the player stops doing these activities, Rick's stats will actually start to deplete. That's right, even if you spend a couple of hours working to increase all of Rick's stats to the maximum, if you then stop doing the associated tasks, they will begin to decrease. I don't think I've ever played another game where this happens, and it's another quite frankly bizarre and very poor gameplay decision. The previously mentioned crafting system is a good idea in theory, but fails due to the randomised nature of items. By combining certain items, players can create weapons, armour, various tools and equipment. The majority of materials can be found in desks throughout the game world, and it seems for the most part that the contents of these desks are randomised as they seem to change every day. The problem with the crafting system is that a lot of the materials needed to craft the more useful items appear very rarely, leading to the player spending hours searching desks over and over again. As most of the levels aren't that big, it gets extremely boring hunting through the same desks repeatedly. I feel as though the only overwhelming positive thing that this game has going for it is its little moments of fan service. As a fan of the comics, it is nice to see the characters take on their comic appearances with aplomb. Glenn appears bald during the prison mission, as in the comics he shaves his head whilst there. And when the player begins the woodbearing mission, Rick wakes up and is missing his right hand just as he does in the comics. There's also plenty more little Easter eggs and moments like this throughout the entire game. One little Easter egg that I particularly like is the fact that a lot of the character dialogue is straight out of the comics. Seeing Maggie sit down with Glenn and tell him she's not sure she loves him anymore shows an awful lot of attention to detail within the comics. It's just a shame that the rest of the game wasn't treated with this much love and respect. However, one small detail that does bug me is the interaction or lack of between the characters, and this was particularly apparent during an incident that occurred when I was on Herschel's farm. The main objective when on the farm is to equip the survivors with weapons in order to clear out the barn of walkers. First time around I decided to take Maggie with me to help, and unfortunately things didn't go to plan and she ended up dying a horrible death. The next day I sat down for breakfast on a table that included her dad and her would-be boyfriend, and no one said anything. Obviously I wasn't expecting a funeral speech, but it would have been nice to have some kind of unique dialogue appear, especially when something as major as a character dying occurred, even if only just to make the characters seem a bit more real. Instead it seems as none of the characters have a fraction of anything even resembling a personality, making it really hard to care about any of them. The Escapists The Walking Dead is a complete mismatch. It's a combination of two things that have no business in being together. The game mechanics only serve to hinder, frustrate and annoy, and even as someone who's a big Walking Dead fan, the little nods to the comic books aren't enough to see me through it. This game is an unrewarding, poorly designed slog, and I urge those thinking about buying it to think twice. If you want to play a slow, methodical Prison Break game, then just play the vanilla version of The Escapists. Whereas if you want to play a game that makes good use of the Walking Dead license, then play either Season 1 or 2 of Telltale's The Walking Dead. Just don't play this game, unless you have a thing for doing virtual chores. So thank you very much for watching, please like, subscribe and comment if you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all soon. Until next time, goodbye.